You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. And today we're discussing this Strange New Worlds episode, Subspace Rhapsody. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel are Jimmy Akin. Hey, Jimmy.
Howdy, Dom.
And Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father Cory.
How's it going?
Folks, be sure to stick around. We have plenty of listener feedback that we want to share with you. Lots of good stuff that you've sent in. Be sure to follow The Secrets of Star Trek in Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn, your favorite podcast app, or on our YouTube channel, where you should also make sure to hit the bell to get notifications. And another show on the StarQuest Network you are sure to enjoy is The Secrets of Technology. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/technology. So, Jimmy, can we get a recap of this episode?
In this week's Uhura-centric episode, Star Trek does West Side Story. The Enterprise has encountered a natural subspace fold that's manifesting in our universe, and they're trying to figure out how to use it for communication purposes. They try sending music through it, and it creates a quantum improbability field that creates an intruding effect on the local reality so that it works like a Broadway musical. When people are having emotional moments, they burst into song and dance, either individually or in groups. And they start confessing feelings that may not be fully comfortable for everyone once the musical number is over. They try using tech to zip up the subspace field, but it causes the musicality to start spreading to other parts of Starfleet via its communications network. And people on other ships start singing. Then they think about trying to blow the anomaly up, but they discover that this would destroy the Federation and half the Klingon Empire. And a ticking clock starts because several singing Klingon ships are on their way to blow up the subspace fold. Eventually, Uhura figures out a pattern in how the musical numbers work, and she realizes that if they can turn the singing and dancing up to 11, it will cause the subspace field to short out. So Pike directs Uhura to lead the entire ship in a musical number. It works, and everything goes back to normal, at least in the sense of people not spontaneously singing and dancing anymore. But they still have to deal with the emotional fallout of all the difficult things they confessed while singing. The end.
All right. Overall impressions of this one, Father Cory.
So I am on the side that not a fan of this one. Not because it was done badly. It wasn't. It actually was done very, very well. I mean, they fit the whole idea of it becoming a musical in. It wasn't just like some series have done where just all of a sudden an episode has music. You know, episode's a musical, and that's it. You know, this is they actually fit it in with, some, technical babble, plot line, and, it works as far as that's concerned. And of course, the resolution is the singing, and everybody's together and they're singing and all that. But I'm just not a musical fan. I'm really not. I never have been. I've only seen a few musicals. The only ones I really liked was the Mel Brooks producers, and which is great because it's Mel Brooks and it's the producers.
Springtime for Hitler in Germany, winter for Poland and France.
A certain name. So anyway, but beyond that, I in part of it, and we'll talk more about it, they were kind of inconsistent on what would cause people to start singing and dancing. And there's actually one key scene that that would have played into that, would have been some singing, that would have been because of how they expressed what causes them to break into song. So I wasn't a fan. It was well done. It's just not my episode. Let's just put it that way.
Okay. Jimmy, how about you?
Well, for a long time, I was not a fan of musicals either because I'm really about plot. And many musicals have paper-thin plots that I don't find interesting at all. But then I encountered Gilbert and Sullivan, and they have some intricate plots. The Mikado is... From a plot perspective, it is like a coiled spring. It is very tight. And so actually these days I can enjoy musicals provided they're well done. I enjoyed this episode just for the fun, like I did Those Old Scientists, which was the Lower Decks crossover. In both cases, I would have leaned heavier into what they were doing. I would have leaned in those old scientists. I would have leaned heavier into the comedy of Lower Decks. In this one, I would have leaned more heavily into the musical. I would, because they have musical numbers in it, but they also have a lot of dialogue scenes. And I would have made everything after the subspace anomaly happens a song. I would have had nothing but songs for the rest of the episode until they resolve the problem. I did enjoy the music, but I had a few things I would have done differently. One of the things I had a question about is why they didn't use Klingon opera, since they have Klingons in here. And I actually have thoughts about that I know we'll talk about later. But given that number one is a fan of Gilbert and Sullivan, and given that she talks about that fact to James Kirk in this episode in a song, I would have had it be like a Gilbert and Sullivan number, but it's not. The musical style is some kind of contemporary Broadway musical style, which I'm not overly familiar with. Uhura kind of sets things off by broadcasting music from the Great American Songbook into the Subspace Anomaly. And the Great American Songbook is a sort of loosely defined sort of canon of American 20th century popular music, not rock and roll, not country, but what was considered mainstream pop music all the way through the 20th century. Well, at least actually down to like the 60s or 70s, but not rock, not country. That's genre music. This is more mainstream. And specifically the song she broadcasts is Anything Goes. And so they don't really have a match between the kind of music that Uhura broadcast and the kind of music they're doing. So I would have probably done the music a little differently. I would have done more music, and I would have edited the last scene. It's entirely reasonable that they solve the problem with a show-stopping musical number. They need to do that. That makes sense. So I know we're building towards a big grand finale number, and that's as it should be. But what they do wrong, and also given the rules they've set up, now in the final number, there's lots of talking about singing and unity and we're all together and all this kind of stuff. And it sounds very Star Trek Discovery. And that can be a little off-putting, but here I think it works because given the rules of a musical, people do sing when they're emotional. And turning it up to 11 and getting everybody on the same page emotionally to short out the singing, that actually all makes sense. So I wouldn't mind it. It's distracting, but not because of this. It's distracting because Discovery exists. If Discovery didn't exist, this would be fine as far as all the we're singing together, we're the unstoppable crew of the Enterprise. That would have all been fine. What I think is a problem, though, is they make Uhura the linchpin for this final number. It's fine that she figures out the pattern and says we need to do a big number, but then Pike is like, okay, so there's only one person on the Enterprise who can lead this thing. It's you, the voice of the Enterprise, Uhura. And it's like, no, that's not how Starfleet works. The captain sets the tone of the ship. Mm-hmm. The captain should be the one leading the final number. And we've got to make it all about Uhura is modern woke nonsense. So I would have just changed that. I mean, Uhura can start the song, but it needs to be Pike focused because of the way the captain affects everything. And the final Uhura, you saved us line is just, it's cringy. But with that exception, I really enjoyed this episode, and I would have gone even heavier into the music.
So for me, I know this episode is somewhat divisive among fans. I mean, a lot of people either love it or hate it. I mean, there's people in the middle, but there's some people, no one was asking for a musical. Well, some of us like the musical one. Anyway, I don't hide my love for musicals. Especially the older ones, like from the 60s and Music Man, the golden age of movie musicals. So I enjoyed this. I recognize that this is very much modern Broadway style. All of the music is modern Broadway, which I'm less familiar with. I mean, I know Hamilton, but that's about it. There was a little too much. It's a musical. They sing because of high emotions. And as you point out, Jimmy, we react because of Discovery, but there still was a little too much. Every relationship in this that has come up in this season came up in this episode, and it's like, oh, can we do something else besides all the relationships? So that was a little much for me, including a couple of them that were kind of like, I know you're going to have different energy levels, but I'm like, that one didn't land for me, that particular song. But in general, I really had fun and really enjoyed, and there was a literal laugh out loud moment for me in the end. We'll talk about that as we get to it, but I was generally positive to this one.
Oh, by the way, one thing I was going to mention, I actually would have introduced musicality into Star Trek a lot earlier. Back in the series Enterprise, they had a much more you've got to make your own fun thing, since you couldn't just go down to the holodeck, and that's why they had movie night and stuff like that. And they even on Next Gen, they had the crew performing plays and stuff. Back when Enterprise was on the air, I thought it would be great if they had an episode that began with the crew or part of the crew performing the Pirates of Penzance with T'Pol in period costume singing "I am the very model of a modern major general." I mean, she would have been perfect for that.
Yes, she would have been.
They've had musicality in TOS. I mean,
yes,
would sit and play and sing and stuff.
She sang that song to Spock that time. Yeah.
In fact, I was going to point out they are syncing in to precedent in Star Trek, because Uhura was musical in the original series.
Charlie X was the episode. Yeah.
Yep. And she sang more than one song in that, and she would hum on other occasions. Also, I did like, now you kind of thought they did too much of this, but I did like how the songs in this episode build on things they've been doing all season. And I liked how, because I'm about plot, and I liked how this episode tied into a lot of elements that they had set up earlier in the season, with relationships and things like that. It's like, okay, they're paying off this now. And I liked that. I like seeing those cross connections between episodes.
I mean, in some ways, it felt like a season finale where they were wrapping all of those threads up. But I don't think you could. It's fun. You can't end the season on a comedy musical episode. Yeah. That wouldn't work, I don't think.
Oh, one of the things I also liked is an original series callback, because they have Uhura waiting on a message about another fellowship she's applied for with Dr. Roger Corby.
Chapel.
Dr. Chapel. What did I say?
Uhura.
Oh, sorry. Chapel is waiting on this. Has Dr. Roger Corby approved my fellowship, which is another rare fellowship in xenoarchaeology she's applying for, or archaeological medicine. And we know where that goes, because that's the basis for the episode, What Are Little Girls Made Of? So she's going to go off for this 3-month fellowship between seasons, presumably. And either at the end of that or at some point in the future, she's going to fall in love with Roger Corby. And they're going to get engaged. Although I hope they don't do that initially. I hope this is just her first meeting with Roger Corby, and she still will have some romance with Spock until, like, maybe we get to the last season of Strange New Worlds.
I kind of get the feeling they're kind of cutting the Spock plot line short.
They're done.
I mean, and part of her whole thing, when she finds out she gets it, and they have the whole song and dance number where she's,
I'm ready.
I'm ready. I'm going to go do this, and she pretty much, Spock's done.
Well, it's written so that it certainly could be that, but having watched soap operas when I was in college, they can go back and forth. Relationships can seem definitively over, and then they come back. It's like the serial killer at the end of a slasher flick.
I know that they're not rigidly adhering to timeline stuff, but according to the original series, we see him in Corby in 2261. This takes place in 2259. There's not a whole lot of time for them to get engaged. So I'm thinking this is it. This is the
she's going to go for that 3 months with him and fall in love with him, and
that turns the knife even more on Spock, because like 3 months, like she's engaged. Like with this, she's like, I don't know, and then 3 months, throw him overboard, and she's with Corby. So I don't know. We bring in Kirk again in this episode. There's a little controversy I saw, or not controversy. There's some people complaining that Kirk's showing up too much in a Pike Captain Pike Enterprise. That they're trying to do something too TOS-y with this. Do you think Kirk is too much, or?
Yeah, he's been here. He's been in the show 4 times now out of 2 seasons, and the first 2 of those weren't even in this timeline. So this is his second appearance. It's proximate to his first appearance in this timeline. It's the very next episode. And they're doing something logical, because they've said he's been promoted to first officer of the Farragut, but before he assumes that office, they're letting him shadow number 1 for a week, to learn from a first officer how to do this. And that makes sense. That's fine. He's going to go off and be first officer of the Farragut.
Yeah. What's with the Enterprise's really janky computer that can't handle, calculating things and routing calls? Like, because we start with Uhura having to manually route all the calls through
like
the switchboard.
like a switchboard operator. Yeah.
Exactly. I just thought that was kind of a funny little gimmick that they've added.
They're trying to throw this super well, and it was dealing with the communication system. So maybe I think that's why they're trying to.
Sure.
But yeah, it was just her doing the, please stand by. And
Which in some ways, it's kind of a callback to the original series, where some people said that Uhura, her whole role, in fact, it might even been Nichelle Nichols' complaint initially, is that she was just a glorified switchboard operator.
Yeah. And frankly, in the 23rd century, a computer could do what she does. You don't you don't need her job. If I can say to my Alexa device, drop in on this person, and it calls that person, what do I need a switchboard operator for?
Yeah. Right. So meanwhile, La'an is still acting girlish around Kirk at the beginning of this, and Una has noticed. She's figured something's going on, and so that's where we get. La'an has several songs. She treats this whole singing thing as a security threat, which it kind of is, because people are revealing things that they want to keep secret. But she's also threatened by the fact that at any moment she could start singing her feelings for Kirk.
And she knows that's not supposed to happen because of the timeline.
Yes.
And that is a legitimate concern. And she eventually handles it by talking to him when she's not that emotional, and she's able to phrase it very delicately so that she doesn't upset the timeline.
Right.
And that's reasonable. There's also a great moment where we see the threat, because you've got Captain Battelle and Captain Pike are singing over the view screen at each other, and they start getting really personal. And this is about conflict in their relationship.
It was funny.
And La'an saves the day by unplugging the phone on them so they stop singing before they go any further. And that's a great moment, and it shows the threat that's real here.
Yeah, he even ended up on a knee before she cut him off.
He gets down on a knee and puts his hand over his heart, and he's about to deliver some really painful news to her, and then click, we're not in the phone call anymore.
Yeah. Well, that scene between La'an and Kirk is the one that I thought that they didn't play well, because that it was a very emotional scene, and it was played emotionally by both of them.
Right.
And yet
I expected a song. Yeah.
Because La'an didn't, I didn't feel like she played it unemotionally at all. I felt like it was something that was very painful for her, but she didn't break into song at that point. They didn't start singing about it. And her, which by the way, we have mention here of Carol
Carol Marcus.
Carol Marcus, and that she's pregnant. And that was kind of somebody, Dom.
Yeah.
Kind of caused a controversy on Discord about it. No, that Kirk didn't know, but actually we kind of discussed it in Wrath of Khan. He did say he knew, and that she asked him to stay away.
He stayed away. Right.
So
That's right.
He knew about David, but he stayed away because she wanted to focus on her career and on David, and didn't need this fly-by-night captain. It's
David who didn't know that.
Yeah.
Right. So I like La'an's, solo self-revelatory songs were my least favorite. I mean, I know you got to have those sorts of songs, but I just they didn't land for me. They felt a little too downer in this up, energy level thing. They just weren't fun.
I didn't have a problem with them. I thought they were okay. I thought you might have cut one of them, but I didn't have a problem with them in principle.
Yeah.
They were kind of, the 80s teenage breakup songs.
Taylor Swifty.
Oh, I would point out that there are scenes in musicals. We may be reading the rules they articulated a little more stringently than we should, because if you actually watch musicals, there are moments where people have intensely emotional scenes where they're not singing. They don't have to break out every time there's an intense emotion. And, there are loads of them where someone says something and someone else throws their hand across their face and runs off stage crying and stuff like that. You do have moments of intense emotion that aren't song. They don't articulate it that way in this episode, but that may be because they don't want to give us too much lecturing about how musicals work. They're assuming we'll kind of go with it, especially if you've seen other musicals.
Mm-hmm. So the whole thing starts because they're trying to communicate through this subspace fold, which if they figure out how to do it, it will revolutionize communications throughout the quadrant somehow. Hand wavy, and it's Pelia who suggests sending music through it.
And my
physics are different in subspace.
My fan theory is Pelia is, being thousands of years old, has seen this happen before, and she wanted it to happen again. And Pelia set this whole thing up.
So the song they do send into it is "Anything Goes," which I forget what that's from, but
it's from the early 20th century.
Yeah, it was in a play though, wasn't it? I remember it from the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom. Of course, that's the opening song in that one. That's and of course when they sing the first song about all systems stable, it's called Status Report on the soundtrack, which you can get on Apple Music, by the way. And it's Pike's expression. That's one of the moments where I kind of laughed out loud because he just has this bewildered, like, what the heck is going on expression.
And they're like checking in with everybody and everyone's saying all systems stable. And he's like, but why are we singing?
Yeah. Exactly. And then we get the opening credits after that, which, like with the Lower Decks crossover, they changed up and they gave us an a cappella choir singing it instead of an orchestra, which was really good. I really like that. That was really nicely done.
I like a scene early on where they're talking about it, and Pelia, notice who it is, explains that this is a musical reality intruding to our own. And I forget who it is. It may be La'an or someone, but says, so like what? We could just turn into bunnies or something? And Mbenga says, I would prefer not to be bunnies either. And Spock says, I doubt we will be bunnies.
Yeah. Well, I like Mbenga even before that. It's like, I don't sing. I don't like to sing.
So apparently the bunnies line might be an homage to the famous Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical episode, which was similar, in which a musical reality caused them all to start singing, and one of the characters was singing that the cause might be bunnies, and it was kind of a funny moment. But so I feel like that might be it. Another point, Spock, when they're talking about why people sing, Spock says sailors use song to help them sing together, which totally reminded me of Star Trek V, Row, Row, Row Your Boat.
There's something else, though, that I think it's a reference to. They talk about La'an, I think it is, says she's gonna confess this when she's about her feelings about Kirk when she's not that emotional, and it won't come out like a 17th century sea shanty.
I would love that.
And what that's a reference to, if I'm not mistaken, is the fact that during COVID, sea shanties became all the rage on either TikTok or Instagram or something like that, where you'd have all these millennials and post millennials doing sea shanties.
The Wellerman song, in fact, which was the one that got it all started. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I wondered if that one might have been it. I would have loved to have heard a sea shanty. That would have been fun too. So we get a reference that Admiral April has called in and is still said he has a surprisingly beautiful baritone, which I think is a good line. And then Una talks about her Gilbert and Sullivan fandom, which came out in the Short Treks episode where we had her and Spock stuck in the turbolift, and that she starts singing to Kirk. They even dance in the corridor, and La'an sees them, and her jealousy leads her to sing alone in her quarters about it. That's that self-revelatory song. So Uhura comes up with a theory that this musical reality, this improbability field, requires them to follow the rules of musicals, including characters singing when their emotions are so heightened that words won't suffice. So that comes from Uhura. And Una sings to La'an this song that she's too good at keeping secrets. And I was wondering, is she telling La'an is this her telling La'an to tell Kirk how she feels?
Yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure if that was exactly what it is.
They also do an interesting effect in this. They have a 0G effect where they float off the floor.
Yeah.
As part of the choreography. And you do actually see things like that in musicals sometimes, where they have the performers doing wire work, where they're being suspended by wires to be able to dance in ways that you can't otherwise do. Here they did it with an explanation of someone's fiddling with the gravity system as they're singing this. But the actors actually did wire work, and then they CGI'd out the wires.
Right. We find out around this point that the thing is spreading, and it's spreading into Klingon space, and they said don't contact the Klingons because the last thing anyone wants is singing Klingons, and it turns out that's not true. Actually, by the end of this episode, I would say no. I really wanted that, but we do get Klingon General Garkog on screen, and played by Bruce
Horak.
Hemmer.
Hemmer, yeah, he's back again. Yay!
It was awesome. I said he looks really familiar. Who is playing it? And I didn't realize it was Bruce Horak, so that was fun to see him get in there again.
I learned also, and the Klingon general he's playing has an eye patch. And so like Hemmer was blind, and this general has a vision problem too. I was interested to learn that Bruce Horak himself is legally blind. Yeah.
Oh,
he's lost 90% of his vision.
Yeah, I mean that was the whole
illness, and his vision deteriorated.
Right. That was like before the first season. They talked about a blind person playing a blind character. Hemmer was was blind. They were blind.
Well, I know that representation of that sort is all the rage today. Personally, I don't care about it. I thought he did fine. I'm actually sorry he's actually blind, but he's doing a great job in spite of it.
That's right. So we do have that scene where La'an reveals her feelings for Kirk, and I have to say, Paul Wesley does the Kirk smolder at least as well as Shatner does. Like there's a moment at the beginning of that where he kind of looks at her, and I'm like, wow, like he's got that. Like that is a very Shatner Kirk thing going on in that expression. It's not exactly the same thing, but it has the same character energy. So I thought Paul Wesley's really coming along. He continues to grow on me as well. What I don't find as plausible about it is I just don't find La'an that attractive. The way she, particularly because of the way she does her hair. Yeah, it's weird.
As a person, she's fine, and as a character, she's interesting. But I don't find her sexy. She's got this severe haircut that it looks like her hair is wound tight. And I mean, even Ortegas. Now, Ortegas has a weird haircut too, but I don't mind her sort of weird mohawk where she shaved the sides. I mean, I could see how someone could find that attractive, but La'an's haircut looks painful to me, and I don't find it attractive.
Well, it's meant to be, you know, the no nonsense security person, you know, basically the female version of like a high and tight, you know, something that's no maintenance, just pull it back and tie it off and done.
Yeah. Is she Kirk's type? Well, she's a female.
Well,
so
everyone is Kirk's type.
Say,
yeah.
Well, she's not a green alien, so she's not Orion. No.
Exactly. Or gold, or all the other ones.
It's like that internet meme where you have 3 Greek statues, and you've got Zeus and Hera, and Zeus is looking back at a third statue, and it says literally anybody else.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we get Chapel's song, I'm Ready, where it's basically a breakup song for Spock, who basically has to stand there in the lounge area, what would be 10 forward in TNG, which I really like this bar actually. But he has to stand there emotionless and motionless as this song goes around him, and it felt really heartless in a way. It was really
it was.
Wow.
Yeah, she was almost cruel.
Cruel is the word.
It's just like, I don't care about you anymore. I want to do. This is what I've wanted more than anything else in the world, and so forget you. I'm gone.
Yeah, and it does not portray Chapel in a flattering light, but I think it's a good and effective song. And then Spock has a follow-up song in Engineering where it's not obvious from the beginning of the song, but I said to myself, they're going in a mathematical direction with this, and the song is I'm the X. And he's talking about, and initially X is like I'm the X as in ex-boyfriend.
Right.
But I said, this is Spock. They're going mathematical here. And when the next time they come around to that line, it's clear from context. It's like in algebra, you solve for X. I'm the X.
Yeah. And in fact, in one way, he's also like the X factor as a hybrid, you know, human Vulcan hybrid. It's sort of he's the unknown. There's something, you know, he doesn't fit in, I think, is kind of where they were going with that as well. Oh yeah, it worked on several layers.
And I wonder if this is going to be where they're going to kind of pull back his emotions again.
I think so.
Because even the way the song goes, where it fades out of song into speech at the end.
Yes.
Kind of showing that again, going from the emotional, where he gets control of his emotions again, and that's it. It's done.
Before the singing stops, there are a couple of really nice lines. At one point in the grand finale number, they're singing about our prime directive. As you know, we're on mission, protecting the mission. That's our prime directive. And Spock is like, not really. And there's another moment where you've got like a line of 4 characters, one of them Spock, and they're all singing, we will miss the singing, and Spock is, I won't miss the singing.
Well, let's talk about that song because this is they have to sing this song to amp up the whatever energy.
And by the way, as part of the setup for doing this number, Uhura points out, song is powerful. People worship with song.
Yeah.
And that was nice to see acknowledgement of religious reality in this series.
So, and to bring up the point you made, which is like Pike says that only Uhura can inspire the whole crew to sing. And I'm like, Captain would be the one who stirs the emotions of the crew, who gives the inspiring speech before whatever.
No.
The captain is the voice of the Enterprise, or the voice of the ship.
In a way, I think this was, you know, part of this trying to develop her into the character that we know from TOS. I mean, it really, you know, and they called that out on TOS, the episode TOS, those old scientists, where she wasn't the carefree, I mean, you know, good, you know, worker, you know, intelligent, knowledgeable, and all this stuff, but she could relax. Well, she isn't that character, you know, and they're kind of moving it towards it. So I think that's part of what this is.
It's possible.
Yeah, I think it's also agenda driven. And it's not the only, even though this is nowhere near as bad as Discovery, it is not unaffected. by contemporary Hollywood sensibilities. One of the things that I've noticed, particularly in this season, is they are deliberately de-emphasizing male characters. If you think about, so who are the male and female characters on this show? In terms of regulars, Pike, Spock, and Mbenga. Those are the only 3 male characters. Everybody else is a woman. Number 1 is a woman. Pelia is a woman. La'an is a woman. Uhura is a woman. Ortegas is a woman. Chapel is a woman. And even their new navigator, who's in a bunch of episode, Mitchell, she's a woman. That's 7 regular women to 3 regular men. Mm. And so there is a deliberate let's get away from males and de-emphasize that and empower women, and that's why they go to Uhura as you're the only one who can do this, even though it makes no sense.
Right.
And this is not a sex thing, it's a captain thing. If this was Voyager, Janeway should lead the number.
Man, could you imagine a musical Voyager? That would be interesting. They'd stand around the consoles at the end and sing.
Yeah.
All right, so my favorite part of this episode, my very, very favorite part, was when the Klingons came on the screen and were singing a boy band number with the choreography with Batless behind. I laughed out loud, paused it because I was laughing. It was so funny. It was,
even like a zoom out and everything, where it's just Captain and then it zooms out to the rest of the crew.
That was so fun. And then you had a later bit where the Klingon cruisers are pirouetting around an Enterprise that's spinning in space in a
like a dance number. Yeah.
Oh my gosh, that was so. I mean, yes, it doesn't make logical sense in the world that we live in or the world that we presume Star Trek to normally be.
But it does in a musical.
Yes, it's fun. It's fun.
And I know we have feedback on this, but yes, that should have been Klingon opera. Absolutely should have been.
I'm gonna take a different point to that, but I'll bring it up when we get the feedback on that. But and then we have Uhura at the end after everything has been finished. Uhura's at her console doing like Michelle Nichols would do with Uhura, she's humming to herself, singing to herself, and everyone kind of looks at her like, "Oh no, are we still in the?" Probably she's like, "Earworm, sorry, earworm, just singing."
Yeah. Well, it was like the closing number. She was humming it again.
Yes, yes. So that was great.
Also, we get a nice scene in the wrap up where Spock is staggering back onto the Enterprise bridge drunk, and Uhura in voiceover is informing us that he's done a little bit of diplomacy with the Klingons.
That's right. That is right. And then we get a bit of like end credit medley stuff, which was nice. That over the credits, that was nice too.
Kind of like the overture in a musical, only this is not the overture; it's the inditure.
Yes, yes. So, anything else you wanted to mention there, Father Cory?
The only thing is, because this was kind of a wrap up for a lot of the season. A lot of the threads that they kind of set during the season, they kind of wrapped up with this. So I'm interested to see what they're going to do with the final episode, because they're usually final episodes are kind of a wrap up of a season. But they've
Gorn attack
a lot. Yeah.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I'm
It's called hegemony, so yeah.
Yeah. So but it's just interesting that they took all these little threads and they were, and again, for my complaint against it being a musical, because I'm not a musical fan, they did a great job, I think, in as a whole, in bringing a lot of these threads, especially the more emotional ones, and kind of wrapping them up so that they're not having to deal with them in this next episode, which, if it is a Gorn attack, is going to be a much heavier action,
intense. Yeah,
you don't want to do this. You don't want to do the discovery. Hey, we're in the middle of battle and it's red alert. Let's spend 5 minutes talking about our feelings for each other.
Yes, please don't.
I'm sympathetic, because I didn't used to like musicals either. It wasn't until I found good ones that it's like, okay, now I get what the appeal is to these. You should try watching some of the best Gilbert and Sullivan ones, like The Mikado or The Pirates of Penzance or something. Those are really awesome. In terms of my notes, let's see. I like that they heard the music cues that initiated songs. Yeah. And the first time it happens is like, where is that coming from? And nowhere on this ship. Yeah. So I liked that. I thought that I liked in my notes in the emotional meaning to a lot of the songs that built up over the season. So if you hadn't seen the previous episodes in the season, the songs wouldn't mean as much. So I liked that it tied together previous elements of the season. And I thought it was good to have it in next to last position, because it does sum up a lot of the emotional content we've been building in this season, but it's not the last episode, so which allows us to have the big explosive finale we're going to get next week. Also, I like that Captain Battelle finally gets a first name. After being Captain Battelle for 2 seasons, we learn her first name is Marie.
Mm-hmm.
That's right. All right, excellent. So that's it for Subspace Rhapsody. Let's go to our feedback. Like we said, we have some feedback on Subspace Rhapsody, but first we have feedback from number 272, Those Old Scientists. And the first one comes from Kelly via YouTube, who writes, I was surprised how much I enjoyed this episode. I love Lower Decks, but I was afraid that bringing the characters of that show into live Trek would be too silly. I was pleasantly surprised how well this was executed. It was a very fun episode and one I will probably revisit in the future. I loved seeing Boimler especially. He even did that weird run of his, and he did that weird walk that he said in a Lower Decks episode was something Section 31 does. I'll have to rewatch that because I don't remember that. Our next one comes from Francisco, Mormon Druid Yalian Disney Kid. That's his username on YouTube. Wait, but it was Kirk's Enterprise that encountered Trelane. Oops, that was a great episode and your commentary was good. Yeah,
I noticed that they're blurring what the TOS era is really, but they do that just by the title. Yeah, they're considering this Those Old Scientists. It doesn't have to be exactly Star Trek, the original series period. And within that context, it would fit. If you consider the Those Old Scientists period as mid 23rd century, then it fits. But I noticed the same writing issue.
Well, I think that's actually kind of a call out to, like, we might talk about the Next Generation era of Star Trek, and that's DS9, Voyager, and TNG.
Yeah,
you know? So this could be the TOS era, even if it's not the TOS series.
I chalked it up to, sometime around this period they were talking to Trelane, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I chalked it up to the MST3K mantra. It's really just a show. I should really just relax.
Exactly. Our next email comes from Father Jason Tyler via email, who writes, I really enjoyed the podcast. Thanks for putting it out every week. Going into Subspace Rhapsody, I must say I had rather low expectations, but the episode proved much better than I imagined it would be. In the end, I was glad to see Star Trek venture into this area of culture, as Trek has done with so many other areas of culture or literature, Shakespeare, Beowulf, and Sherlock Holmes, to just name a few. As a Catholic priest, perhaps I should be disappointed that an episode full of music featured no Gregorian chant. As a Trekkie, though, my greatest disappointment was that in a musical episode featuring Klingons, we didn't get any Klingon opera. Any thoughts on why the writers didn't have the Klingon singing opera music, considering the various references to Klingon opera over the years?
Yes, 2 thoughts. And first off, I want to give a shout out to Father Tyler because he's my pastor. I just moved back to my hometown in Arkansas, and he's my new pastor, and I even go to the Gregorian chant mass. So I know he has an appreciation for that. And it's great to hear from him. In terms of why I think they didn't do Klingon opera, because that was my first thought too. As soon as we saw Klingons, it's like, oh, are we going to get Klingon opera? Well, I think that they chose not to for, actually, I would say 3 reasons. Number 1, we've heard Klingon opera before, so it wouldn't be groundbreaking for us. Second, it doesn't fit the musical style they're using here, which is contemporary, contemporary Broadway musical. And I think that's probably one of the dominant factors, the non-diegetic factors, is they're doing modern Broadway musical style numbers, and Klingon opera doesn't sound anything like that. It's loud, it's bombastic, it's atonal, it's dissonant, it doesn't fit with the music they're trying to do in this episode. So those are 2 non-diegetic reasons. Is there a diegetic or in-story reason? Yeah, I think so. The Klingons refer to the subspace fold as the source of our humiliation. So they need them to feel humiliated so that they'll be motivated to come and destroy the thing. But if they were singing their own revered musical tradition, Klingon opera, they wouldn't feel humiliated. Whereas if they're singing like a 21st century boy band when they're fearsome warriors, they would totally feel humiliated. So I think that's the end story reason.
Yeah, they broadcast American musical content into the fold, and that's what's coming out, I think.
Yeah.
I would still like to have seen him work something in, maybe like when the Klingons first hail them, and where the captain's fighting to just keep speaking instead of singing, and then he fails. If instead that would have been started with Klingon opera, and he's fighting to try to keep it Klingon opera instead, or something like that.
So we've got another email from Chris S., who writes, this is a more general email. I finally suffered through all of season 4 of Discovery and very much agreed with your analysis. Recently, my 14-year-old and I began watching Deep Space Nine together. I've seen it numerous times, but he's only seen sporadic episodes. We began with the season 2 finale and have been watching it sequentially and enjoying nearly episode. There's a moment at the end of one episode that, for me, perfectly illustrates the difference between a great Star Trek show and a not-so-great one. No, he says spoilers for the episode Second Skin. We're all about spoilers in this one, so don't worry about that when you write in.
And the episode spoilers.
We're a review show. This is spoiler territory.
Yes. So Second Skin, in the episode in which Kira wakes up to find she's a Cardassian. The twist in this episode is that Kira is merely a pawn in an effort by the Obsidian Order to entrap a progressive Cardassian leader who believes Kira is his daughter.
She's really not, but she's been altered to look like a Cardassian.
Right. In this episode's final scene, Kira tells her Cardassian father that he's an honorable man and that his real daughter must love him very much. It's an emotional, powerful moment generated by a mere line or two of dialogue, and yet it's more powerful than 99% of the earnest yet unearned speeches we get from Michael Burnham and the Discovery crew.
Yep.
Right on target there. That's exactly the complaint.
And this episode is not the only one that has similar kind of emotional content for Kira. In fact, if you started with I understand the choice to start with the second season finale because this show starts to get a lot better there in a cohesive way. It's kind of hit and miss before that. But if you go back to, I believe it's the first season of Deep Space Nine and watch the episode Duet, which pits Kira with a Cardassian war criminal. It's really good and very emotionally powerful.
Yes. Chris goes on to say, I enjoyed the first 2 seasons of Discovery. Unfortunately, the show took a left turn, eliminated both the best characters and all of the conflict, the best characters being the ones who showed up in Strange New Worlds. I won't be watching season 5. Thankfully, we have Strange New Worlds, Lower Decks, and Deep Space Nine reruns.
So for Star Trek principles, we've got Growing the Beard, which of course is when TNG got good, and we've got Going to the Future, which is when Discovery went bad. So,
right. Don't go to the future.
And Discovery wasn't too great before that.
Well, we got Strange New Worlds out of season 2, so it wasn't that bad.
Yeah. And I will say, Father Cory and I watched them, so you won't have to. So we will watch season 5 and review it.
Oh, and I forgot to mention with Father Tyler's comment that, yes, I agree with, we needed some Gregorian chant somewhere.
Sure.
I agree. As a fellow priest.
Yes. All right. That does it for all that feedback. And so we want to now take a moment to thank our patrons and make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Katie K, Andrew W, Simon M, Sean D, and Ronald P. Their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest. And you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. So that's it from us. What did you think of Subspace Rhapsody? You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page at facebook.com/StarQuestMedia, send an email to trek@sqpn.com, or visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/Discord. Comment and watch the show in video on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia. And we'll be back next time when we'll be discussing the next new episode of Strange New Worlds, which is also the season finale, called Hegemony. Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing the secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
Jimmy Akin, thank you as well.
Thank you.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to the Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest. And remember, all systems stable. But why are we singing?